Welcome back. I wanted to talk about another recent, or relatively recent, research article that came out on Dytiscids. This was published last August in the Zoological Journal of the Linnaean Society. Dytiscids are predatory beetles. They're probably my favorite group of insects. I've talked about them before on this channel. And this is a really interesting article that came out from a team of international researchers from the Czech Republic, Canada, Brazil, Spain, Costa Rica, Germany, Colombia, Ecuador. They really did a lot of work. And this article is a species description article. These were new species of Dytiscids, which were found in Central and South America. And what is interesting about them is that they were living in flowers. So let me show you some of these Dytiscids. So Dytiscids are predaceous diving beetles, and like I've spoken about before, they're really speciose for being a relatively primitive species of beetles. There's about 4,000 species of these. They are generalist predators that live in freshwater streams and ponds and things like that. But sometimes you can find them in kind of swampy areas that don't normally get water. So you can find them in rain puddles that, if they've been there for a little while, snowmelt puddles. I have collected them in flooded grass. After like a week of rain, they start reproducing in the grass. And they really pop up in some strange places because they'll feed on basically anything, particularly things like mosquitoes. Anywhere that mosquitoes will live, these guys will live. And both the adults and the larvae, which are here, that's a larva, are pretty voracious. The larvae are sometimes called water tigers because they have these enormous jaws and they'll bite down on all sorts of things. But probably the most speciose genus in the Dytiscids is called Copilatus, which is here. And there's lots and lots of species of these guys, and they show up in all sorts of places. And some years ago, some entomologists had collected some Copilatus, which were living in bromeliads. And bromeliads, if you're not familiar, you've probably seen these before. You can find these in a lot of floral arrangements now. These are epiphytic plants that live on trees and on cliff faces, and they'll live high up in the canopy of tropical rainforests. And some of them, tank bromeliads, the petals and the leaves grow together so tightly that they can collect water in them. And they can get very, very large. They can get, a couple feet across in some cases, like you have a bush practically living up inside a tree. And inside this water that collects in there, all sorts of invertebrates can get in there and swim around and complete their life cycles. So with the Copilatus that had been found previously, they were kind of generalists. These were Copilatus species which had been found in streams and things like that. This would be Copilatus bromeliaris, I believe it's called, and Copilatus bimaculatus. But in this case, they found three new species, which this paper names. So this is a species description paper: Copilatus espinhanso, Copilatus flore, and Copilatus penguana. And what is interesting about them is that they've never been found anywhere else before. These species seem to have been evolved to live within only bromeliad flowers, high up in the tree canopy, where they complete their entire life cycle. They spend their entire lives up there, it seems. And these guys collected them in a number of countries. They went to Brazil, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama. I believe they also stopped by at some point to Trinidad and Tobago, maybe. But they collected all sorts of things, and they have pictures in here. A lot of this paper is a description of the morphology of these insects. So if you aren't familiar, when you collect a species, and you've realized you've discovered a new species, how you publish that, how you let other people know about this, is you have to basically take apart the insect and measure everything. And then you take pictures of everything, you draw everything for both the adults and larvae, if you can find them, and you give an exhaustive description of its physical form. And so that is what has been included here. So for Copilatus bimaculatus and Copilatus bromeliarum, which is A, B, and C here, these are the species which are kind of generalists that they found in other places. But then you get into the photos and descriptions of the new species. So this is Copilatus espinhanso, and then I'll get to this in a minute. Down here you have Copilatus what is this? Copilotus florae and Copilotus panguana. So A, B, and C are Copilotus florae, and this last one, D, is Copilotus panguana. This is the larva of Copilotus florae. And one of the things that you do frequently is, with beetles, with a lot of insects really, and especially with Dytiscids, is you can do a species ID if you aren't sure what you have, almost entirely from the male genitalia. So this picture here are the genitalia of all the species I've mentioned: Bimaculatus, Bromeliarum, Espinhanso, florae, and panguana. And as you can see, if you take a look at these, this is the median lobe and the, I think, the right paramere, median lobe and a paramere. Yeah. So you can see the structure, the shape, the size, the curvature, where the hooks are of the male genitalia are different in all of the species. So if you aren't sure what you have, with a lot of the aquatic beetles, if you have some of the males, you can dissect out the male genitalia and you can do a diagnostic that way. So frequently, this also works with female insects, depending on the group. You can dissect out the female genitalia and do a diagnostic that way, because generally speaking with insects, even species that look almost identical or identical but are different will have different structures in their reproductive organs. So this is a long description of all of those species that they found. It's exhaustive. And then also where they found them. And then with the larva, frequently you will include drawings instead of photographs. And the reason for that is you can really show the details that you want that are diagnostic, things that would normally be lost in a photograph, like the position of all of the setae or the hairs on the body, or the positioning and the names of all of the spines and things like that, which are normally very difficult to see even on high magnification in a photograph, because there's a lot going on, or coloration issues or anything like that. But with a drawing, you can just include the things that are important. And then they talk about the habitat. So this is a picture of them collecting. If you've never seen how bromeliads work, they grow on the sides of trees and then up into the canopy. And some of them are absolutely huge. So this one is growing on the side of the tree. It's enormous. And you can see how big it is compared to the researcher here. He's taking it apart and showing where he is collecting the beetles that live inside these. And they tend to live in between the layers of the leaves or in between the layers of the petals. They really squeeze in there. And what they found is that these have actually evolved. One, they're not host specific. They seem to be in favor of all bromeliads, it would seem. But they've evolved certain physical characteristics, apparently from the same common ancestor. All three of these new species seem to be related, and they all have very similar characteristics that are different from other wild pool-dwelling Copilotus. So, for instance, a lot of them are more compact and more curved. They have a strong convex shape and a strong teardrop shape. And also, their limbs are much shorter. So let me go up here. Their limbs have a shorter ratio on their body compared to like Bimaculatus. So they have like longer tarsi, longer tibia for Bimaculatus, but then if you look at Espinhanso here, it's much shorter antennae. If you look here, they're much longer. These antennae are considerably shorter. The legs are considerably shorter. They're more curved, and the researchers think this is to help them squeeze in between those bromeliad leaves that are really, really tight together so they can move in and out of the pools, and helps them get around. So they have a much different shape, and this shape has also been associated with Copilotus, which have been found living in underground cave systems. So kind of tight spaces that you might need to squeeze through. But they are also so they all have the same morphological adaptations to this hygrofloric lifestyle, which means water flower, but they also are genetically related. So they do seem to have evolved from the same common ancestor, and they have evolved specifically to live within flowers, which is really, really unique. So I wanted to share this with you just because it's really cool. These guys did a ton of work on my favorite group of insects. I would love to go to one of these jungle situations and collect there for these bromeliad species. Hopefully I will one day. I will attach, or I will link the original article. It's open access, so you should all have access to it if you want to read it yourselves. I encourage you to, and I'll talk to you guys later.